Good evening, everyone. This is Moon Lee, founder and director of Unlocking ADHD. I'm really happy that you joined me tonight for a very important topic that actually bothers a lot of us with ADHD, but until tonight, there hasn't really been a very multi-layered perspective to understand what is the meaning behind some of the behaviors that we do when it comes to finances. And I'm really happy about the three amazing individuals I have tonight who can share their expertise with you and also the strategies. Tonight, we are focusing on what are the financial strategies for ADHDers to get better control of money. And our speakers will be Dr. Mian Lee, who's a child and adolescent psychologist, who will share from his experience, with finances, and he himself is an ADHDer. We've got Gail, who is a certified financial wellness coach, and she will share as well from her perspective, not just as a coach, but also from someone who was very actively building her career in the financial industry. And last but not least, we'll have Mohammed Firdaus, who's a program executive with Credit Counselling Singapore, and they work with those who might have gotten a little bit over their heads, and how are the ways that they can get themselves out of that situation. But before I bring on Mian Lee, I just wanted to share with you as well some of the interesting things that we found when we looked into the financial issues that sometimes plague those with ADHD. In a quite recent survey in the UK, about 500 individuals, they found that about 65% of those with ADHD said that it is their wiring that makes it more difficult for them when it comes to managing the finances. In what ways? There were five main ways. The first of all was the anxiety. And, sometimes just thinking about money causes that anxiety, right? We want to explore why tonight. But ADHD, 76% of them indicated that they had issues with that versus those that didn't have ADHD. So about double. Similarly, in terms of bill payments, I don't know how many of you have missed bill payments, but you know what? When I get too busy, that happens to me. About 50% of those with ADHD have struggles with that, 3 times higher than those without ADHD. Difficulty sticking to a budget, 50% of ADHDers, 3 times more than those without ADHD. Impulse spending, many of them, just because of the way we're wired, the inhibition part, we end up buying things that we don't need or that we're not going to use. And of course, there's the debt issue. In my own family, and I'll share more later, family and friend circle, many of us have experienced a lot of struggles when it comes to credit card debt. So Firdaus will be sharing some of the strategies on how to manage that. I would like to introduce our first speaker for tonight, Mian Lee. Mian Lee. He's a clinical psychologist working with children and adolescents. And he really is someone that, when I first met him, I was just so excited to meet him because Mian Lee is a fantastic combination of evidence-based. He's got his PhD, he's into research, but he's also got the lived experience part. And I think he will share more with you later when you hear him. But that combination is something that I think brings a lot of value to our event tonight. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Mian Lee to share with you about financial strategies for ADHDers from the clinical psychologist point of view. I'm just going to stop share now and then bring up Mian Lee. Mian Lee?
All right, sounds good. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so thanks so much, Moon, for such a great introduction. Super glad to be here and super glad to sort of be able to share insights, I think, both from a clinician's perspective, right? Sort of that professional perspective, but really, I think as Moon shared, I sort of have self-disclosed and pretty outright as a person with ADHD myself, and it's not been easy. So I really feel what you all feel. Okay. Before I sort of get started, we'll be talking about a sort of few broad principles into sort of what makes ADHD so hard for us, right? I do sort of want to start by saying that all of this is extra stuff, and whatever you pick up from here is extra and good for you. Okay. Let's not get overwhelmed and let's just learn what we can. Okay, because we are special and we are sort of unique in our own ways. Okay. All right, just sort of want to keep that in mind. Okay, because us ADHDers can be, we can get quite emotional from time to time. All right. Without further ado, I'm gonna get started. All right. So I think as Moon sort of alluded to the using the statistics just now, right? Folks with ADHD are sort of 3 to 5 times, more likely to be in debt, experiencing sort of anxiety over things when it comes to financials. And I think these quotes sort of are quotes that I've heard myself, okay? Sort of paraphrase them a bit, but really they get at the same point. People live paycheck. They forget to pay bills, right? And especially in the States where I sort of used to work, people would get their power cut off. Okay, and then with cards, which Firdaus will sort of talk about more, you get late fees, overdrafts, and things like that, which are just not fun and just continue to sort of add on to that burden that we already have. All right, so we know that sort of people with ADHD just don't really do well when it comes to finances. And again, the three key things that sort of come to mind. Number one, missed bills, like I sort of talked about, overspending, right? Because while people with ADHD are able to then see, right, that I sort of need to save, I need to invest. Again, stuff that Gail will sort of talk about in a bit. But I just can't help it. I can't predict. I don't have that sort of ability to predict and keep that in my mind. Overspending is one key issue that comes up with that. And financially, I think sort of lastly with the emotional piece, right? I like to say that us people with this condition, we have a superpower when it comes to our feelings, right? And when we feel a certain way, that just sort of builds up and just causes us to avoid even more late bills and things like that. So they sort of work together in a very cyclical way. Okay. Now next, I like to sort of just want to give a very brief overview about the 4 minds that are key to ADHD here. There are a couple others, but these are the 4 that really, I think, pertain to financial management really well. And I'm going to leave the specifics to my other grade 2 sort of guests here as well, okay? So 4 things that come to mind. Number 1, the mind's eye. What does this really mean? It really means that we don't have, people with ADHD don't have the ability to visualize that well. That means that comes up outside of financials. It comes up with things like planning a schedule. If I don't write it out and I don't look at it, I don't have it in my head, right? And as you can see from the slides, difficulty with visualizing long-term financial goals due to time blindness. We just don't plan times really well. So this can occur in really small ways, like, I start working on something, maybe on LinkedIn, maybe on my homework, right? And I lose sight of time. And then I got to leave for my appointment somewhere now. I realized that I'm going to be late and I had planned to take the train. Well, guess what I'm going to do now? I'm going to take Grab, right? And that adds up because these are unexpected costs and what I like to call the ADHD tax. Comes out in small ways like this, but in sort of broad ways as well, right? With just having a real aversion when it comes to insurance, a real aversion when it comes to investments or making sort of reckless investment decisions, which I'll get to in a bit for the hard part, and Gail will get to as well. Now, that's for the eye, sort of that prediction piece, right? Then there's the mind's voice, also known as sort of verbal working memory, right? And this is the internal dialogue that undermines us, right? That voice in our head is kind of muted, right? If you think about infants, they sort of do a really nice job. Well, they sort of can't control themselves that well, so they just say what they think, right? And what we know that for people with ADHD, again, everyone's ADHD looks different, right? That voice can be kind of muted. Okay, I'll get to that in a bit. The mind's playground. So broadly known as sort of the organizational skills. Briefly said, a lot of the financial skills, a lot of the time management skills that work with neurotypicals, right, don't really work for us because we just have these challenges when it comes to being emotional, not being able to see time that well. Okay, I'll talk about that in a bit as well. And then finally, the mind's heart. Okay, I like to say, again, we have a superpower. It can sort of work against us. A nice example I like to use in the sessions that I have with my clients is Elsa, right? That princess from Frozen, the Disney show. When she conceals, she doesn't feel, and then she doesn't want people to know. That's when it all sort of goes haywire, and our emotions are both our sort of strength as well as our biggest Achilles heel. Okay, so I'll get to that sort of each step in and of its own. The mind's eye I've sort of talked about quite a bit, right? A couple more things beyond the sort of time blindness and future planning bit is that folks with ADHD, more often than not, right, tend to hyperfocus. This is what I refer to as when when you are interested in something, you just go deep and you lose all track of time, right? And when we tend to go deep, then we tend to sort of lose focus of the broad picture, sort of leading to then sort of impairments when it comes to planning and things like that, right? Number two, sort of I've addressed this a little bit, right? Time elasticity. This is the term that I've heard from one of my clients this year, and I loved it so much. I'm going to use it right now. It feels really abstract. I know it's there. I know I need to plan well. I know I need to save well. I know I need to retire well, but I just can't see it in my head. Okay. And therefore, I'm going to make the decisions that I want. And lastly, sort of prioritizing becomes hard. The executive functioning is just not that great. When I can't see it, it's hard for me to want to save for it. Why not just spend right now? And I'll get to sort of maybe address it a bit more in the heart piece, the mind's heart piece. But a lot of us ADHD folks tend to then in the moment come up with some grandiose meaning for why I need to spend now. And that just doesn't work well. Okay. Now, next, sort of the mind's voice. Get into a bit more detail here. I talked about the muted reminders. Often people who are sort of neurotypical, they have that voice in their head that has been built up over time. Hey, do this, right? And due to the chaos that happens in our head, that voice is really, really soft, right? And there are lots of things we can do, but that's sort of not the point of today, right? And when that voice is not strong, obviously, then when it comes to adhering to one's budget, it becomes really hard. Your voice just isn't that loud and isn't loud enough to tell you, you got to remember to do this, right? And that sort of naturally leads to that impulse piece. When you don't have an internal dialogue, it becomes harder to resist. You're just going to do what your eye or lack of eye or your heart tells you to do. Okay? And I think this is one big reason why a lot of people with ADHD tend to then speak out their plans out loud. Okay? To sort of have that voice be a bit louder. But again, outside the scope. Okay? Now, the mind's playground, these are really sort of tools and skills, as I sort of earlier shared. The sort of typical financial tools don't work very well for us, right? So planning, right? When you sort of go to a financial consultant, if you have one, tells you, go do this and then do this. That just feels boring. It's not fun. And people with ADHD just don't like things that don't feel new and fun, okay? Organizing, sort of due to that lack of executive control, those minute details just feel really difficult to sort of keep track of as well. Mainly because money is just not intrinsically a fun thing. And I think that's where sort of Gail will get to how do you make it more meaningful for yourself, right? Gail will sort of talk about that a little bit more. So I won't sort of talk too much about this. Okay. Following through, right? If I don't like to plan, I don't like to organize, good luck to us following through. I just don't do it. And this again leads to really poor outcomes because I don't want to do it. Then it just snowballs over time. Okay. And I will say that I myself, I sort of face some of these issues as well. And lastly, sort of those technical aspects, again, leads to the, I don't have the skills, I don't really want to deal with it, it just feels too complex, let me leave it to someone else. Or like, let me just not do it. Okay. And again, part of this can be the ADHD bit. And if one has ADHD, probably some kind of financial trauma also comes in, right? Which can get quite complex, which sort of Gail will allude to. So we have talked about the eye, talked about the voice, talked about the playground, talked about the heart. We are going to talk about the heart right now. Emotional regulation, I would say, with all the issues that folks with ADHD have, I would say self-regulation would be the one phrase I would use the most, right? Or the lack of that. If I feel like it, I'm going to do it. The example that comes to mind is that, even though I know I need to be saving, I need to be investing, right? But when I feel good, and I'm in a bar for people who sort of go to bars, because I feel great, let me just buy one round for all of you, for the entire house, right? Even because it feels great. When I feel like it, I want to do it, right? And to sort of bring your attention to the slides then, emotional triggers. Okay, emotions are our superpower. When we feel stressed, we feel good, we spend. Because we just don't have that concept of what it means to save, right? And number two, like I shared in that beer example, right? It makes us feel good. If I feel like it and it makes us feel good, then I do it. A related piece here is also sort of that gratification part doesn't have to be just feeling good, but also about pleasing other people as well. Because I want to make you feel good. I don't want to let you down because I don't want to feel bad. That's why I do it. Okay. And then this leads to, again, a cycle of regret. And since emotions are our Achilles heel as well, then I start to feel bad. I want to spend more in order to feel better about myself. You see how that can be a really painful and really vicious cycle, not just for the people with ADHD themselves, but their family members, their loved ones, their kids. So this does have really disastrous outcomes. Yeah. Strategies for the mind's eye, right? So the next piece around what can we do? I'm going to broadly talk about it, but Firdaus and Gail are going to get into much more detail than I will, right? So in the sort of Q&A, we can, I would love to chime in a bit more. With the eye, the issue is being able to see. So creating a vision board, writing down what you actually want. What are your goals? Do I want to save for a car? Go for that vacation. Write it down. Make it visible. You have to see it and repeat it every day if you can, right? Physical reminders, right? As you can see from the slides. I do this for myself. I have only one card and then I have a sticky on it and I say, are you sure you want to spend? Because I tend to take it out to like spend on that nice shirt that I want to wear, right? And I think many people on this call will sort of resonate with that, like buying things that they actually don't use. I've bought stuff that I have thrown away like 2 to 3 months just because it now looks like crap. Okay. Then the last bit. Firdaus get into more detail, but using the right apps can be really helpful to minimize the load and help you see what your goals are. I like to say it's almost like an electronic way of putting money into an envelope so you can't see it. Okay? All right, I'm going to quickly sort of run through the rest. Techniques for the mind's voice then, right? How do you strengthen that voice? Verbal reminders. So alarms are what come to mind. Whatever you need to do, set a reminder. But then, of course, the downside to that is that when the alarm comes on, you actually got to do it, which is tough as well. Like what I like to say, or what I said just now, verbally saying what you need to do. That can be helpful. Like, okay, I'm not going to spend now because I want to save up for that fun vacation, which is going to feel so good. Again, linking to those strong emotions, which are our strengths as well. Positive affirmations, saying good things to yourself. And I would say that, go as far as to say, teach your loved ones to do that for you as well. Because us ADHDers are so guided by our feelings, right? So hearing good things makes us feel good and therefore help us to be more likely to follow up on these money-related things. Lastly, sort of financial journaling, not for everybody because it takes effort to sort of write. But this is where sort of Gail will talk about it a bit more. How do you strengthen that financial voice of yours? Okay, and really make that really clear for yourself. Okay. Lastly, I think the sort of skills here are what Firdaus will really get to a bit more. I think I shared the first one right at the very top. Limit credit cards. I just have one. So for the people who use a tome, buy now, pay later, this is not for you. For us folks, this is not for us. We can't do this. Okay. A bunch of other tips here, including getting an advisor, apps that I've talked about before. But I think one big thing here is to get someone whom you can trust to manage your money so that your load isn't that high. Planning ahead of time, these kinds of things. One last one that I like to talk about is remove easy payments from your phone. So I personally, I don't have the option to easily pay. So that sort of adds an additional barrier for me so that I have to take out my card, I have to see it. Hey, don't spend. Remember, you want to go for that break, right? Adding barriers that way can really help our heart to and help our sort of playground part of things as well. Add those really barriers so that we don't give in to our impulses. Okay. Now the last few bits about the heart. Know what your triggers are. What gets you upset? For most of us, it's when people don't tell us nice things, or when we don't sleep well, or when something that happens to us. Just know what those typical triggers are. That helps a lot. Okay. The cooling off period, sort of what I alluded to, having a barrier, right? Waiting for a little bit. That allows our heart to sort of settle down a bit and for our mind to sort of come online again. The third piece I believe is what I think many of us ADHDers have. Make it fun. Have a sense of humor about it because it's so ridiculous that you have to actually, for example, put a sticky on your card. So ridiculous when you think about it. And so having a sense of humor about it, knowing that this is lifelong, I think can be great. Okay. And I also like to say, as you meet those goals, reward yourself in small ways because that feels good. Again, the feeling of feeling good. And lastly, I think I've talked about this quite a bit, but involve people around you, people whom you can trust, people whom you know are much less likely to trigger you. And of course, a community like the one that we have here at UA also helps. Okay. I think, so sort of in summary, I've talked about a lot of strategies. Gail's going to share a lot. You're going to hear a lot from Firdaus as well. But anything we get from this is great. Even if we just pick one and work on it, that's great. So I think I will sort of end on this note that be kind to yourself. Whatever you learn is great, and stay positive, keep pushing forward, and you've got this. Okay? And I think on this note, I'm going to hand over the time to Gail, who will then sort of chat a bit more about this, or to perhaps Moon, who will then sort of do a nice closing about this as well.
Thank
Thanks
you,
for your
Mandy.
time. Okay.
Thank you. Actually, I was furiously writing notes, when you were sharing just now, because there's so many nuggets of wisdom there. Definitely hear you and feel the pain of the ADHD tags. I suffer it all the time. Someone was saying about the pause that you mentioned. I read a story where somebody actually froze their credit card, put in the freezer so that it takes time for it to thaw where they could use it. So all those extreme things, sometimes it helps. But when I used to be a lawyer and I got very stressed out at work, during lunch break, I'll walk around the shops downstairs and guess what I did? I'll be shopping. Okay, so again, this gives context to sometimes our behaviors and we don't understand why. I think one of the most interesting things that I noted when you were sharing just now was about the accountability, and also having the affirmation and the support of community. And that's something I think when it comes to finances, is something we're not used to, because finances we tend to associate with privacy, secrecy. And then when we get in trouble, it's with shame as well. So it's something that not many people are comfortable, but I think just as in the area of mental health, right? We need to be okay to be not okay sometimes, and to be able to share and ask for help. So really appreciate what you shared. I think it's important. And I love how you emphasize about the self-compassion, right? One step at a time, whichever stage of life we're at. And I think it's very healing. So I thank you for that. Now let's move on to our next speaker. I'm really excited to be able to introduce Gail to you. When I first heard about Gail's background, I thought it was so amazing that she's not just a financial coach, but she can also share about financial trauma. Is something that not many of us are familiar with. Gail actually has a background in the financial industry. She used to work at Morgan Stanley, doing mergers and acquisitions, and advising clients about how to invest. And she's actually a very financially savvy person. Yet from the career and the professional side and the personal side, I think there's also a very different approach to finances. And Gail, in the last couple of years, become a professional and certified coach, and she focuses on the area of having a better relationship with money. So tonight, I'm really excited to have Gail share with you the principles about understanding and managing your relationship with finances, and how you can have a better and healthier framework. So without further ado, let me just bring Gail on, and looking forward to hear from you, Gail.
It's so great to be here. Thank you for welcoming me into your space. I am a self-identified ADHD, late diagnosis, and I also have a son who's neurodivergent, including ADD. So it's very close to home, this subject, in addition to obviously in the wheelhouse of money, an area that I'm passionate about. So tonight I will share a bit about my approach in helping folks make money better, and also talking about money beliefs and money trauma that has been the bread and butter of what I've been helping folks overcome in order to have a better relationship, but also outcomes with their money. So tonight I'm going to talk you through a number of financial behaviors that I have worked with. And yes, some of these are folks who are not neurodivergent, but I believe that there is a spectrum of behaviors, and I will highlight and focus on the behaviors and strategies that are being used, which may be applicable to all of you. Just a bit about me, in addition to what Moonlake has kindly shared. I've been coaching for 14 years after a career on Wall Street, and 3 times certified as a coach. And in the last 7 years, really focusing on the area of money and combining that with how folks measure success for themselves. I also do some B2B work, but I'll keep going with my coaching approach. So when we talk about financial wellness and how the outcomes that I work with people on, it's not just about getting them literate, right? And literate is a combination of skills and concepts, so the knowledge that we have in our brains, but also self-awareness. In my work, I found, and I'm the perfect example, I'll talk about that. I found that the amount of knowledge does not necessarily determine one's success or wellness with money. So being well financially is not having a lot of money, or it's not knowing a lot of things. You may have both, but you may not create any meaningful progress or behavior change without being self-aware around your money beliefs and traumas and how to manage your internal machinery. So as ADHDers, we often struggle with overwhelm or emotional dysregulation. And it's not that straightforward to just say, put that aside and just make a decision based on the numbers. I'm not sure. I certainly have had that experience. And I am, a qualified professional in finance. You could say I'm top 1% in skills and concepts, but having 2 out of the 3 was not enough. I was still arguing with my husband about money in my 20s. I left it to him initially, and I was in some form of PTSD from workplace trauma that had me shy away from looking at money, dealing with money, working with finance folks for a while. So you don't need to know that much, actually. You don't need to have a degree. You don't need to go for so many courses about money and technicalities and all these topics that I've put here at the bottom of the slide. But it's also important to be self-aware about your risk appetite and your nervous system, because our beliefs are the root of our attitudes, our behavior, our actions, ultimately our wellness around money. So this approach to financial wellness is quite unique. Most folks tend to focus on, what do I do? Tell me what to do. Tell me what I need to read, and then I'll be okay. But there's actually a gap between knowing and then doing, and having systems and a ongoing process that works for you, so you can be well with money throughout life. And this approach is how I work with clients and help them to get to that point of wellness. So today I'm going to talk about money narratives, about money trauma, as well as recommendations that work to make money better for anyone. And I hope that it will start you off on awareness about your self-awareness around money. And I'll sprinkle in a few ADHD relevant comments and observations too. So it's a big word, trauma, financial trauma. What is that? Many people draw a blank or have this question mark above their heads when I talk about this. Well, financial trauma is not it can look like a whole array of things. And I'm going to talk about that in 3 buckets. There could be single incidences or events in your life that could be the spark of some form of financial trauma. And these are some examples of what people have experienced, where I've seen leave them with a wounding or with a certain fear and anxiety or association with money that blocks their constructive action. So if you've experienced any of this, it's easy to just say, oh, yeah, so-and-so got off, so-and-so, got scammed. But what if it happens to you in your body, in your hard, and recovering from that. I think what the way to relate to trauma is having compassion and understanding that these are human experiences, and no one goes through life experiencing zero. And so if it were to happen to you, there is a whole emotional world, psychological world even, that comes out of these experiences, that translate, and we respond with trauma coping mechanisms, which I'll talk about in the next slide. But let me finish the second and third bucket. Financial trauma could also be from ongoing circumstances. Something quite common, unfortunately, in Singapore is burnout culture, sometimes toxic workplace culture, and perhaps poverty or domestic violence and financial abuse. And also, a word about our societal culture. We live in a culture where if you're bad with money, it's a shameful thing. Or if you aren't on top of your money, you're like less of a person. And that's not the healthiest approach, but it is something that is quite unseen and unsaid, and sort of part of the air we breathe and the background of our lives. So that's what I would refer to as societal culture or capitalism as ongoing sources of trauma. The sense of scarcity, the sense of not being enough, not happy about that can as the level of trauma response. And most of all, most powerfully, we can inherit lessons and ideas and beliefs about money from our family, our immediate, our generations. We have so many of us in Singapore who are immigrants or descendants of immigrants. And that culture of settling in a new place, starting from scratch, the ethics of hard work and scrimping and saving and value on education and prioritizing upward economic mobility, that is the backdrop, the tapestry behind our psychology around money that informs and contributes to some of the financial related wounding that drives us. So how do we respond to financial trauma? This is where you can start to look for clues and observe in your behavior and your history whether you might have any financial wounding that limits or gets in the way of your wellness. And there are 5 buckets of trauma responses. The first is a fight response, and that is perhaps the only direct, what I would say, the only non-avoidant trauma response amongst this array. Now, as I go through each of these, I invite you to jot down and take note of which of these you've observed about yourself. And that's going to be relevant as we go through the next couple of slides and really help you zero in on the root and where some of the gaps and areas that you can work on for yourself. Because every human being is unique and different, and much of this journey is about self-advocacy and recognizing yourself. So I was talking about fight as the only direct trauma response. There's also flight. So those of us who fly away from money problems or try to flee money problems could do it in 2 ways. One is working really hard to solve a problem. So overworking, overthinking, getting anxious, that is the sort of squirreling, busy ant way of fleeing a problem. Then on the other end of flight, there is the complete escapism that comes with overwhelm. Sometimes I've heard the phrase functional freeze, where we literally have to numb ourselves to run away or forget about anxiety-causing issues. Fawn is also one of the trauma responses that tends to correlate with codependency. So if you have been a people pleaser all your life, if you've been masking a lot of behaviors, your true self, if you feel like your sense of identity of who you are is a bit insecure, sometimes we may have boundaries then we may tend to fall into the fawn category. So fondness is not direct because we always want to please, we always want to fit in, we don't want to rock the boat. And so we might admire others. We may attach ourselves to others who maybe are very good with money. And we may have like a victim or martyr or save me mentality around fawning behaviors. That is our way of responding. The next two are quite similar, flop and freeze. Flop is less, I see that less in financial situations, but more in other, it's more other forms of trauma, physical trauma or abuse situations. They generally, flop and freeze generally is a state of being frozen, right? Being paralyzed, not being able to move. And to the extent of being disassociated, ostrich in the sand mentality, decisions that need to be made that drag on and on and on. And it just feels wrong to do anything. It's frightening and scary. And so it's just better to not change. So I'll give you a moment to think about which of these stand out to you, are familiar to you as responses. Because in the next slide, we'll have another lens of looking at your financial wellness. So far, we've been talking about our nervous system and how we respond. And money is quite multifaceted. Money has 9 realms, and in each realm, we may have a different level of nervous system activation. Some realms are we are very with. For example, well, let me talk through the realms and then I'll give the examples. So the first realm is one of earning. It's whatever, it's your career, it's your job, that sphere of life, right? Money, bringing money in and creating money. Then naturally, we also spend money. And the choices here are around needs, luxuries, present spending, future spending, compulsive spending, saving. I guess by default, it's what's left over when the first realm minus the second realm. But there could also be specific saving goals. There's securing the money. So this is areas of insurance or legacy planning. There's investing, money that you set aside to grow for the future use. There's borrowing, so mortgages, anything, credit cards, giving and receiving, which could be charity, but also your general attitude to giving things, being just, or do you feel abundant or scarce? And sometimes even your deservingness. Do I deserve to receive good things? I work with entrepreneurs as well. So fundraising is an area that's big for them. And finally, at the center of all this is you and your self-worth. That often is correlated to money or how much we earn or our status. But if you think about it, we are all worthy of breathing the air, right? And yet many folks I work with only feel worthy when they have certain status or wealth symbols. So I was saying that a person may have a few of these realms that they're comfortable and healthy in, and maybe a few realms where there are gaps or developmental areas. So if you think about yourself, which are the realms that you feel okay with? Which are the realms that you maybe have not wanted to think about for a long time? Or that you feel, oh my God, it's so far gone, I don't even want to look at it, right? I'm ashamed, or I can't talk about this area with anyone. Those are probably the realms where there's a lot of nervous system activity, perhaps some wounding, or some beliefs that we learned from our parents, like don't lend money to friends, money doesn't grow on trees, you must always save, or you have to spend a lot to attract more money. Like we hear our parents and grandparents or friends say certain things about money that we have taken to be the truth and that we live by. So we looked at responses, and then we looked at realms of money. I'm going to show you a fairly busy slide and talk through the behaviors that I have come across that my clients have confessed to or overcome. And so for each of the realms of money, I will have an example of what it looks like to be in fight response, flight response, freeze, flop, or fawn. I hope the emojis there are kind of a helpful shortcut for you to follow through. And I won't talk through every realm, just the main ones that tend to be relevant to every human being. In the category of careers and income earning, the fight response is usually very action driven, right? And kind of the degree of overdoing. So aggressive in sales, that get ahead mentality, the hustle, and deep inside, it may be a compensation for insecurity or worry. Because parents lost their family home, I need to always be earning high, and I got to always get ahead so that I don't fall behind. The other responses in the flight realm I mentioned earlier, you could be a workaholic, or if you're in flight mode at work and there is a trauma or a toxic colleague, you just aren't motivated and connected to your work anymore, then there may be, it look more like missed deadlines. Or it could look like, if you're in a total numb state, it could look like a career in autopilot. Just show up every day and do what boss tells me and turn off, right? For a while, and as a banker, I was working a lot, and so I would just come home, crash on a couch, and then go to bed at midnight. That's a version of freeze. Flop is a higher degree of surrender. So you might call in sick, you might really start avoiding going to the office. And fawn is an interesting one. So I've seen cases where there might be under earning. There may be folks who pride themselves to be team player, but it's not healthy for a career if you need to start showing leadership. In the spend realm, the fight response often that I see is the Scrooge, like controlling of expenses. The flight response is escaping into spending, which can result in overspending, compulsive spending, buying things, and maybe using buy now, pay later or credit cards and not really having a handle on how much of that is layering up and what are you get future self into. Freeze response could be completely ignorant, just spend but not keep track and someone else monitors it. Flop is often confusion. I don't know what to buy, or just like this a self-imposed haze, or don't know. And with fawn, that also does contribute to potential overspending, not knowing when to say no or not being able to say no, and being susceptible to, say, Instagram ads, right? Because we all want to fit in and belong. Everyone's using this lipstick, or everyone's using this skincare. Everyone has a Chanel bag. I have to have it too to belong. Savings more straightforward. We either have the deal seeker who might overbuy and end up with too much of something past the due date. We also have the hoarder, and you might hoard things or you might hoard savings. I work with a great deal of clients who have saved very well, but they've kept it in cash. And they get this sense of security from looking at their bank balance, even though they know cognitively that inflation is actually eating away at their pile of money. Even though they know that they can put that into higher yielding assets, there's something visceral stops them from transferring the money out. You may know that you have money in a few accounts, but somehow this particular savings account, which you spent 10 years of your career building up, is very hard to let go of. I'll skip securing and insurance to talk about investing because there is some overlap there. The fight response tends to look like high risk taking, aggressive, take a lot of action, but not necessarily always productive. The flight response with investing, it tends to be indecision, overthinking, second guessing, beating yourself up if something doesn't go well. The freeze response is like what I just mentioned, not being able to allocate money into investments. And the fawn response is maybe you're a course junkie. You've learned a lot. You've done options trading. You've done value investing. You've done ETF, right? You know quite a bit actually, but you may not take action, or you may not execute well, or you may not have a structured plan. Another foreign response is just depending on others. Let my husband do it. Let my children do it. Let mommy do it. Now, borrowing tends to correlate to bankruptcy trauma, and I think that's quite straightforward. When it comes to giving and receiving, the fight response tends to use giving as a power play, or maybe they might pride themselves on being a taker. Let me grab my opportunities when they show up, right? If you're a loser or you're not. And the other extreme is overgiving. So a savior mentality, or just overgiving to prove that you're worthy, or to assuage some guilt, and also feeling undeserving and unable to receive. I've given you a lot, so I'm going to skip the next two, and let's move on to talk about recommendations. If you recognize, well, let's just zoom out from this detailed page. If you're recognizing trauma responses or behaviors that I've just outlined, what can you do about that? I offer a free tool. This is a proprietary diagnostic that helps people look at most of those realms of money that we talked about. And you fill in a comprehensive questionnaire, and I personally create a report for you where you can see where you think you stack up versus where the diagnostic is saying. And the diagnostic doesn't look just at your literacy. Well, it looks at your literacy in that holistic way. So not just what you know about financial tools and concepts, but also your inner world. So if you're interested in really identifying the gaps, you can scan that QR code or look for it on my website, and I will get it in touch. What's really important wherever you are with money is to really practice and take on building your growth mindset. So some of what I'm going to show you on this page are things my recent clients have been saying, them shifts in the way they think about themselves and money. Most of the time it's like, I'm terrible, it's a disaster, don't even want to think about it. And we have a history, right? We have evidence like of missed credit card payments, fines that we can beat ourselves up about, but it doesn't serve any of us to compare. It's just important to recognize where we've been, and we can't change the past and to look forward. The learning mindset has also been powerful. Can we just accept? And that applies as much to me and my peers in the finance world, as well as folks who might work in completely different industries. Can we just accept that money is going to be a lifelong learning journey? We're going to be looking at money as we move through life stages. It's not like a one-time done and set for life affair. Every time we go through a major life stage, we may have to learn and adjust our money strategies. And so if you look at it as empowering yourself with the right tools ongoingly, there's no destination, and you don't have to graduate from university to get a job. There isn't necessarily a benchmark like that about your financial wellness. And lastly, agency. You can bring others in to help you. You can outsource part of this, but ultimately know that it is your money, even if you choose to entrust others with it. And owning that, we're having a curiosity about, well, what can I maybe satisfy, rather than be an area of dread or failure for myself. And I've seen this personally, because I went from completely investing nothing to being the CIO of my family. And my husband will be the first to attest that I do a better job than he is. And he's a professional investor. So I wanted to share that you can look at unique forms of financial education that address your overall intelligence, such as a program that I run from time to time. As I said, it's not just about acquiring hard skills, but integrating that with who you are inside, with your financial narratives and trauma, and then translating that into action. We've talked about knowing yourself. You can have financial advisors, but this part, knowing yourself, is not something anyone can outsource. And if you're in a relationship, let's say you have a partner who might be ADHD, but really any relationship will have to deal and create about how you want to handle money. And so both parties need to do some work to know themselves, because often the source of conflict is you have different beliefs and upbringings around money. We also talked a bit about growth mindset earlier, but to support any change you want to achieve, remember these principles. Starting today in any small way is great. It's amazing, right? And remember that money is not overnight. As much as what we hear and are told, just do this and it'll be done and it'll be settled. But really, in my experience, people make one big lift in one realm of money at a time. Usually, there's a lot that goes on inner work and outside actual tangible steps to make change in, let's say, your investing portfolio. Try not to go cold turkey. Try not to fall into the ADHD trap of, oh, I'm going to hyper focus and get this done, and I can see all these things I want to do. I'm making a big plan, and then get disempowered when we don't follow through on that, very ambitious game plan. So replacing rather than outright cold turkey restriction can help. Giving yourself patience and a generous timeline, and recognizing shame, right? Those of us who ruminate a lot or who have history of poor follow-up will probably already have some level of shame about that. And a new way of talking with yourself about shame is going to be really powerful in shifting your financial reality. In the financial industry, it is quite common as well to have FOMO at play, to have people who say, oh, you should listen to this expert, right? And try and that takes away your own power. So I invite you to work with people whom you feel safe and good around. Now, lastly, systemizing. There's nothing more boring to me than keying in information from my accounts. And I have many, many accounts. When you have kids, everything is times 4, right, for the whole family. And we have many bank accounts and CPFs and overseas investment. So try as much as possible to leverage technology to do that for you. I'm currently, for example, trialing out an app called Peak, which apparently pulls all this information from your various bank account into one place. Automating processes like payments, credit card, gyro payments, things that are your needs that will have to be taken care of, your utility bill, for example. You don't need to spend time every month manually doing that. I want to say one thing I've noticed with banks that there are certain accounts where if you transfer in if you do like auto credit of your salary, and then you do 3 gyro payments, and then you buy an insurance policy, and then you have this credit card with this bank, then you get this ultra good interest rate. At one point in my life when I was single, that may have worked. For now, I don't even try to optimize anymore, because as I recognize the limits of my attention and my energy, and I invite you to see what works for you as an ADHDer, because really 1% difference is not as big a deal and not worth that energy and emotional labor. Finally, accountability. So accountability with your partner, with your friends, and that can translate into consistent money dates, to look at money, or to even just sit down and let's each work on whatever we're working on our money for 1 hour together. That can be, the body doubling strategy for ADHD I've also used that with money and with my clients. So that's all I have for you today. I am really happy to answer questions. Reach out to me, use my diagnostic if you must. And my biggest commitment is we're all well with money, and there are many important things in our life. This just helps our life work well. And I am committed that everybody can do that joyfully and empowering.
Hi, great. Thank you so much, Gail. When I was listening to you, I felt you were actually describing me. And, I was looking at your the 5 Fs and how it relates to the different realms of money. And I really appreciate the matrix that you did, because it made it very relatable. And also, again, it's not just resonating, but also helps us to zoom out, as you said, and see, which part some of our mindsets affects the way that we behave. So I thank you for that. And I also appreciate the fact that you put a lot of very practical strategies. I will follow up with you and ask you about that app later, because like you, I was one of those who would chase all the best optimized different accounts, and now I can't keep track. So, sometimes you really have to do the cost benefit. And is it really worth, as you said, that little minuscule percentage point, or is it worth our mental health? So thank you. Look forward to, having more of the Q&A later. And let me go now to our next speaker, Firdaus, who's been dying to share with us, all these tips and tricks as well for those who are having financial issues. And thank you, Gail. We'll chat again soon.
Thank you.
Firdaus is a program executive with Credit Counselling Singapore. And this is our first time actually doing a collaboration with another social service agency. And we thought that, for this particular topic, it is so important for those who are struggling to know where the resources are so that they can go and find support. And Firdaus actually has a lot of experience with debt and with credit advising. He's a trainer, and also he works together with his team at Credit Counselling Singapore to develop programs so that people can be equipped to understand what got them into this particular situation and how they can get themselves out. So without further ado, I'm really excited and happy to introduce Firdaus to you.
All right, thank you, Moon. The pressure and the stress of being last to present, and you have two wonderful speakers that have presented earlier, and I'm the last one. I will try to make it as interesting and fun for everyone. Hi, my name is Firdaus. I'm from Credit Counselling Singapore, or CCS in short. I'll be sharing with you some practical tips to avoid a debt spiral situation and how to build good financial habits. But those tips will go into the Q&A segment, because I noticed there's a lot of interesting questions in the Q&A, and I thought I'm going to put all the tips into the Q&A. I'm going to focus a bit on the presentation that I'll be sharing with you. And I think a while ago when we did the pre-survey that Moon shared with all of you, in that survey, about 33% of the attendees of tonight's talk actually talk about the struggles in credit cards and taking up loans. So these are the things that I'll be sharing with you in a short while. Okay. Right, just a quick introduction about Credit Counselling Singapore, or CCS in short. We were formed 20 years ago. This October, we're celebrating our 20th anniversary. So we focus on a few things, mainly, firstly, on restoring the financial well-being of individuals who are facing and families who are facing debt distress, and how to cope with financial setbacks and as well as hardships. And at the same time, we also work with ministries and other social service agencies where we embark on programs to build up on financial capabilities. We work with the low-income families across Singapore, and also to foster financial resilience. But not to worry, I know you guys were asking some questions in the Q&A. Where do we get help with regards to unsecured debts like credit cards and whatnot? I'll be answering all that as well, and also to share with you that help is actually a step away. So I'll continue with my presentation. But before that, I need you guys to help me with some polls. All right, so we're going to get actively with the polls. And what I'm going to do right now is I am going to launch a poll that I hope that all of you guys can participate. All right. So it's just to check in with you guys. How many credit cards do you currently have? And I'll be sharing the results of the poll in a while. And I also will be sharing with you why I'm asking you these questions. Wow, I see lots of responses coming in. So I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to share the results. Okay, based on this little survey that we just conducted, I hope you guys can look at your screen, right? On average, for tonight's attendees, majority of you guys said, I have about 1 to 3 credit cards. Small percentage says about 4 to 6 credit cards. About 5% said, oh, more than 6. About 21% said no credit cards at all. So I'm going to stop sharing here. Now, for your information, did you know that last year, in the first or the third quarter of 2023, according to Monetary Authority of Singapore, 6 million card holders, that means 6 million cards were issued out. And out of that, on average, per individual, we have about 3 to 4 cards. So those of you who only got 1 to 3, normal only, relax, steady, tune. Okay. And so interesting about credit cards. Well, you have a criteria or an eligibility criteria, and it is actually a payment mode or payment facility that enables you to buy something first. You know, you use the bank's resources or the financial institution's resources to pay up first. And then when the billing cycle comes in, you pay back. There's a minimum criteria. At least you need to clock in 30,000 per year. And there's this 20-day interest-free period. You know, they will give you a chance now. Okay, if you pay within your billing cycle of 20 days, no interest will be added on. However, if you incurred outstanding balances in your credit cards, this is where the interest will be based on 25% to 29% on outstanding balances. And there are also late fees if you miss paying within your billing cycle, normally about $90 to $100. I'm going to share with you a bit of a personal story. About 25 years ago, that gives you a clear mind of how old I am. 25 years ago, I got my very first credit card. Now, no one actually shared with me how it works. You know, when you fill up the form, and then there will be this one page where there's a lot of fine print, very small, then suddenly you sign, right? Then you sign, you submit, and hey, I get my first credit card. Oh, nobody taught me. I just start to spend, and then I'll pay back, and then I don't pay the full amount. I noticed after a while, hey, how come my outstanding balances are actually going up? So that's why I kind of realized that, hey, something is not right. So I kind of read up a bit and say, oh, you got to do this. You know, there are steps to actually use credit cards wisely so that you will not go into a debt spiral situation. I'll be sharing with you some of the tips on how you can avoid that. But credit cards, hey, it's very popular, right, nowadays. Okay, now the other thing that I want to share with you guys is this. And rollover balances or outstanding balances. Now, according to reports in the Straits Times in May this year, when I say rollover balances, just for layman terms, we call it outstanding balances lah. The remainder or the amount that is not paid and due and subjected to interest charges. Now, on the first quarter of 2021 this year, the total credit card billings is 23.1 billion. This is how much we have spent on our credit cards for the first quarter of this year, 23.1 billion. I cannot imagine how big that amount is, right? 23.1 billion. Now, even though there is a drop in 4.9% based on the previous quarter, now the amount of the outstanding balances or the rollover balances, right? The amount that people don't pay and they carry forward in their bills every month in their credit card accounts actually rose up to 7.3 billion in the first quarter of this year. All right. So it goes to show that a lot of people out there are actually struggling with credit card debts. Now, at the same time, I would like to share with you another thing. Now, this very global phenomenon called buy now, pay later. So I'm going to launch another poll, okay? I'm going to share with you guys in a while. Let me just go back and I'm going to share the next one. All right, I hope you guys can participate. All right, I just want to check in with you guys whether you guys have utilized this buy now, pay later services like Atomy, GrabPay, or Latitude Pay. And I'll be sharing with you what these services are all about. All right, I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to share with you guys the results. Okay, so, about 36%. Atomy is like the favorite, right? And then you got GrabPay later, about 17%. And some of you, about a majority of you guys actually never heard of this. All right, so what's going to happen is this buy now, pay later. They are started by fintech companies, and especially during the pandemic where everybody moves into cashless transaction, buying things online. So it gave rise to this buy now, pay later phenomenon. And they started by fintech companies. All right. And it allows the buyer, let's say I were to use Atomy, right? I buy something online, I can actually pay it in 3 to 4 installments, interest-free, this option. Wow, I can spread the payment, right? I can even either use a credit card or a debit card. Now, if you use a debit card actually is tied down to your own savings account. Now, if let's say you use a credit card to this and you make late payments and whatnot, that also will incur your late fees and interest charges as well in your credit card bills. And the late fees that you see here, the $10 to $60 is actually payable to the vendor that you actually engage for your buy now, pay later services. Now, all this, whether you're using credit cards or using buy now, pay later, we always have to acknowledge that these are just payment modes or payment facilities. Now, it can be to an advantage, really, if I want to buy something, I don't have the means to pay right? I can opt to go for this buy now, pay later that allows me to break the payments into smaller amounts, up to 3 to 4 payments interest free. So it is actually advantageous. However, like I said earlier, the way we manage our finances or the way we use these facilities will actually have an impact on how things will go about in future. And the next thing that I want to share also with you guys is this, another one last poll. I hope I'm not scaring you guys away. One last poll that I'm going to share with you guys is this. Okay, because I noticed that the pre-event survey that Moon shared, about 33% struggling with credit cards and loans and whatnot. So I want to ask you a situational question in the poll, right? Have you paid less than the minimum amount of on any of your credit cards, or have you missed any of your payments on your credit card account, or you make payment only after the due date, or you often receive reminder calls and SMSs on overdue payments from your creditors? Hey, you guys are awesome, and when I put the polls, the you guys are really participative, so I really applaud all of you guys tuning in. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to stop and I'm going to share with you guys the results. Okay, about, oh, good, 35% of you guys have never experienced this. Well done. Kudos. All right. So a small percentage says, yeah, I paid lesser than the minimum amount that's required. About 30% say, yeah, I really missed some of my payments. 22% said made payment only after the statement due date that will incur late fees. Some small percentage said I've already started to receive reminder calls and SMSs on overdue payments and whatnot. Okay. Oh, thank you so much again for your participation. So all of this, whether you use credit cards or you're using buy now, pay later services, right? There are hidden dangers to it. Now it gives this sense of a false sense of affordability. You think that you can buy anything you want at any point of time. And there's always that tendency of overspending, especially if you're unable to curb your spending, right? And last, it can also lead to accumulation of debts. Now, I'd just like to point out to a few red flags, especially when it comes to credit card debts, and it's actually one of the forms of unsecured debts that CCS actually handles or help to address with our help seekers, right? What are the red flags? Let's say you have a credit card issue. Number one, you're paying lesser than the minimum amount that's required, and you notice that your outstanding balances are growing. Okay, and this will definitely lead to a lot of stress. And last but not least, you start to receive phone calls, SMSs, and reminders, and it can be more intensified, especially if you are lagging behind. After a period of time, your creditors or the credit card companies will start to call you. So it is good to address these issues early before it becomes more difficult to manage. Okay. Last but not least, I'd like to share with you some statistics from CCS itself from 2018 to 2022. What are some of the reasons for indebtedness, especially when it comes to dealing with credit card issues? It helps seekers, but 36% of them actually shared is because of job related. When I say job related, is actually, for example, I'm working a good job, good income, and suddenly I lose my job, right? And I don't have enough savings. And I don't know when will be my next paycheck. But for the time being, I got not enough savings. I still continue to make purchases and charge purchases to my credit cards when I am already struggling with making payments. So about 36% actually cited that. And about 33% say I support family. Oh, my income is not that enough, low income, but I still want to go out and spend with my family. Every quarter, I want to bring them out of Singapore to go traveling. I want to bring them out for fancy dinners and whatnot. And 29% actually said lifestyle. Now, I think lifestyle a bit was also covered by Mian's and also for Gail's presentation, right? It deals a bit about mindset. Right, sometimes some individuals have already adopted to a certain way of living and a certain way of spending. So when our counselors were to advise them, you need to make some changes, reduce some expenses. Sometimes they're not being able to do so, or they're not willing to do so. And last but not least, about 17% actually cited business reasons. Oh, I have run a business, but I need to buy some purchases. My customers haven't paid me back. I use my own line of credit or credit card to pay first. And eventually my customers don't pay me back. So I have like a growing credit card debts that I need to actually embark on. So I'll be sharing with you guys. I'm going to stop my presentation here. For you guys, thank you so much for your participation in the poll. But the questions is about building good financial habits. How do I take charge of my finances? How do I do budgeting? And how do I use credit cards wisely? I'm going to go and answer all that and share a bit more during Q&A. Over back to you, Moon.
Thank you, Firdaus. Really appreciate your sharing. And you can see that people are responding, and it's great so that we have some data here. And you can tell from the data that people are not alone in this. Okay. And that's actually very important for us to realize. I think from my own life experience, I've known individuals because of the credit card debt, not reading the details, the fine print about that 26 to 29% interest, right? Thinking that, oh, just by paying the minimum or maybe just a bit more than the minimum, then, they're doing a good job already, but how come it doesn't go down? Why is it keep on going up? And I think it's really important because these folks are not uneducated. The IQ is very good, but it's just sometimes, again, lack of attention to detail or the lack of financial literacy, because all these are hidden, right? So it's important. I think maybe we can also bring the panelists back on, so that we can maybe start our Q&A now, because we have a bumper load of questions. Thank you, Mian and Gail and Firdaus for all the questions that people are thinking about now. And again, we'll do our best to answer. I know some of them have been answered already via chat, but I also want to make sure that we emphasize some of these. One of the things I want to start with actually is the fact that when it comes to finances, it doesn't just affect us as individuals, but also family members. And one of the things I saw in our questions were people writing in as parents concerned, let's say, for the emerging adult children, on how do you inculcate good financial habits, because if the child or the young adult doesn't have that, it actually impacts not just that individual, but also the whole family as well, right? Especially when they're going to have the first credit card, going to move out from home. So maybe that's one aspect of family, right? The other aspect of family, which was asked, and I think mainly responded in the chat, but also very real, is for those of us who are in a relationship. And we all have different backgrounds and experience with money, but how many of us actually talk about it before getting married? Because that's one of the big sources of contention in a relationship. And the third one affecting family is the older generation. I've known individuals where maybe the older folks weren't as savvy and had couple of credit cards and maxed everything out and didn't have the income to pay off the credit card debt. It was just ballooning. In the end, the grown children were the ones that had to take the responsibility, and it caused a lot of tension. So after throwing it out here to you guys, how would you respond or support families in these three different situations with the three different kind of scenarios? Maybe we can start with Mian first, and then Gail, and then followed by Firdaus.
Let me begin by then asking a question. Due to my lack of executive function, if you could repeat the question in a very brief way, that would help me a lot.
Okay, we're all ADHDers here, no shame, okay? So basically, I think one thing I noticed in the questions that were submitted was that family was a big issue. And we often overlook it because we always focus on individuals, right? But we don't live on an island. So the scenarios is that basically the financial decisions and actions and consequences of our loved ones, whether it's our children, especially the young adult children, our spouses, or our parents, older generation, impact us as well. What can we do to address situations like that and still maintain that relationship? So, Yandy, maybe you can start.
Right. Wow. Yeah, I mean, so many things that I can say, right? And I think a lot of, many of which I think have been covered in this talk. And I think in particular, I think Gail sort of addresses quite a few of them. So I would take a look at the sort of Q&A to sort of read her eloquent answers. But I would say, I think the biggest one thing that I would say, right, would be to see this as a sort of a way to grow, right? That any amount that we do is a good thing. Even by attending this talk, for instance, that's a good thing, right? And having that more sort of embracing that positive relationship with money, even though it might hurt a lot, I think that's really key. And I'm just going to stop there because I think that one of our superpowers is with emotions. So I would then sort of figure out ways to turn that superpower of yours into a snowball. And I would sort of just stop there and as a sort of thing for all of us to sort of think about?
I'll jump in here. I think the principle when dealing with loved ones, whether it's your kids or your partner or your parents, is firstly know yourself so that you don't get triggered in any conversation. And then do your best to iron out any of the woundings or the limitations, because kids learn from the parents by watching more so than what comes out of our mouth. Now, with my kids, we're fortunate. My husband also is in finance. So somehow talking about money is very normal. And we try to take the shoulds out of it because it's an occupational hazard, I guess. But I really try to talk to my kids and play out like what it means, and really try not to be so extreme. If you don't study, you'll be a road sweeper, right? Quite antiquated and extreme, but really these are choices, right? And every day it's about making choices and understanding the consequences. And even with my son really loves Elon Musk right now. He thinks like it's so awesome. And I said, okay, I've got mixed feelings, but what is it about Elon Musk that's so interesting? He has a lot of money. He said, yeah, so he can do, if I had a lot of money like Elon Musk, I can solve some problems in the world. So really hooking on to these popular culture references and using them as teaching moments is helpful.
Thank you. How about you, Firdaus?
Well, I guess before I do the tips sharing, based on a bit of an experience prior to joining Credit Counselling Singapore many years ago, I used to be a counselor myself. I work for a social service agency that actually deals directly with individuals and families overcoming various issues of debt. So I used to go and do home visits even, and I do agree with what was being said. There are psychological effects of having pitfalls or financial pitfalls, and it can definitely affect breakdown in relationship in family. Work performance will be reduced, and then it will lead to a lot of tension, struggles, and it will also impact the whole family by itself. Like for the person is in debt, doesn't just he or himself is affected, the whole entire family will be affected eventually, right? So there are ways that we can actually manage, but I guess more importantly is whatever that the key takeaways of this particular webinar for whoever is attending, it's about being able to practice tips. Because even at the point where we are in Credit Counselling Singapore, I can tell you this, you need to do this, you need to do that. How do you actually put it into perspective to your benefit? Because you need to see the benefit of it. Right? There were questions about investment and all that. Like, I think before you can think about investments, you need to cover your basics. How are you managing your finances? How are you coping with debts? Do you have a financial buffer that if you meet a financial setbacks, where do you tap on? Are you going to rely 100% on your savings? So I think looking at investments is already a bit far off. And we need to acknowledge that each life stage that we go, our finances will go up. If any one of you said your finances go down, teach me. Share with me how you go to different life stages and you bring down your finances. It's impossible, and it's a struggle that every one of us will face. All right. So before I go into tips, I think I will just stop here first. But I still owe Moon the tips. Not she's gonna go after me. She's not make sure that I'm not gonna sleep tonight.
For sure, for sure. I think you're right though, Firdaus. So we really need to go back to basics, right? Get the foundation right. Then we build from there. And it's never too late to start again.
True.
I do know that, for the situations I'm aware of, individuals affected by, in the families with different generational type of financial troubles. And I'm sure you go into it more in detail later, but, maybe reduce the card, right? Go into some kind of discussion, which I'll leave to you in your expertise to handle. But I recently had a discussion with one of my good friends who has young adult children, and they've just started working. They have their own money now, right? But they're still living at home. So she actually started asking him to pay for keep, like maintenance and all that. Not so much rent, but just basically board. Yeah, that's the word she used, board, paying for board. And he was like, why? And said, well, since you're living at home, if you lived out, you have to pay rent anyway, right? To buy food. I provide you food and rent. And they worked out an amount that deemed was fair, still below market rate. And she whispered to me, she said, actually, you know what? I'm going to keep it in a bank account for him. And then maybe when he gets married or he wants to buy a home, right? Then I'll gift it to him. But the key was more of getting that right? That, we can't always expect or be entitled to be supported, especially for the young adults. So it's really giving them that idea of saving and get filial thing as well. So I think there's many different layers of this question. I'd like to go to the next question I have, which is to do with many of us as ADHDers. We sometimes, they always say the ADHD wiring is based on interest and novelty. Okay, but not many of us have a natural interest in numbers and money. In fact, some of us have some condition called dyscalculia, where we struggle. I think I'm one of them, mild dyscalculia. So many of us, our eyes glaze when we think of the word investments, look at financial statements. So how can we get over this? Because we know that in the long run, this is important for ourselves, right? And our families. So basically, I'm talking about avoidance. How do you so-called make yourself interested in something that doesn't naturally come to you? Maybe we start again with Mandy.
Again, lots of ways to answer this, but the one thing I would say is to attach meaning to it's sort of why would you want to do something as difficult as this, right? And again, as ADHDers, our emotions just kind of tend to take us in the direction we want or don't want to, right? And so find sort of really clearly and visibly identifying that meaning. And I think go run wild with your emotions as to the consequences. I answered in the Q&A one question. What tell me about the consequences if I deal with it. And literally, I said, if you don't deal with it, you are going to work till you drop dead. Do you want that? Do you want to sort of not be able to enjoy time? Just work all day and all night? No. And therefore, go get on it and do something about it, right? At the same time, any little bit helps. Sort of just pause there. Right? There are lots of sort of many ways to answer this, but that's the one thing I would say.
Thank you. I like that about the why, right? The meaning, because that's the thing that intrinsically will drive us in the end when going gets tough. Gail, how about yourself?
Along the same lines, yes. And you can use a lot of visualizing tools, imagination tools, really harness the emotions that can, lock you into for working with money. I would also say that fear is often the trigger for people to get working on the things that they avoid. But that often comes when a bit late or when it's a bit close. So what I've been unwiring for myself really is, can I come from love or inspirational motivations rather than fear? Because fear is a blunt tool. And I want to just say that, it is possible to shift from a sort of anxious relationship to money to one with peace and ease and abundance. I just want to put that's possible. A lot of conversations are centered around, if I don't do this, then I don't want to be like that person over there, the cautionary tale.
Yeah, that's a good thing to remember, because the ADHD wiring is actually we work better with carrots rather than sticks, and let's approach things from a more healthy perspective, right? Goal-oriented rather than fear, So Firdaus, I was just wondering though, just moving a little bit back to, let's say on these strategies and tips, right? We talked about a range of things that we can do on a preventive level, right? To understand the framework so that we try to avoid certain situations, understanding our emotions and so on. But in your line of work, it's actually people who actually got themselves into some trouble, right? And how can we get out of that? So perhaps you could share a little bit about that.
Definitely. And I think in view of time, that was your cue for me to share the strategies and the tips as well. Thank you. I totally get it. So I'm going to do screen sharing still. I hope. Yes. All right. Hope you guys can see this. All right. So I think there are consequences to certain things. For example, like credit cards. And in our line of work in credit counseling Singapore, people who are referred to us, well, they have already, struggling already, and they already receive letters from the court, letters from the bank. No, that really intensifies their emotions as well. And that will also prevent them further from making the right and the important financial decisions, regardless whether they are in the ADHD community or not. So I'm just going to share with you guys as we go along some tips to avoid buy now and pay later. All right, no pun intended, referring to credit cards, right? Um, one of the things that we need to manage, later I'll share with you some tips. I heard something about mobile budgeting apps and tips. I'll go to it. So the first thing that we need to acknowledge, if you have already recognized that you're already unable to cope with paying whatever outstanding balances, is don't continue to charge new purchases to your cards. Now we need to focus on how you can pay down as much as and the two things that I can recommend, but it's not easy for a lot of people. One thing, you need to increase your income or reduce your expenses. Something that everyone is struggling. I cannot do either, but I can try to manage or at least do something about it to pay down as much as I can. And of course, credit cards that carry a huge or big interest. So that's something that I would like to prioritize or to handle first. Last but not least, of course, I'm not stopping anyone from making the minimum payment. And minimum payment is normally about 3% out of the outstanding balances. So you can do that. It's perfectly fine. But in order for you to do all this, we need to go down like what Mian Lee and Gail has said. Go back to your fundamentals. And one of the things that I can share with you is to get yourself organized. And I'll be coming in to a short while. Okay, mobile budgeting tools. If you're looking for something colorful and whatnot, you can use your App Store, your Google Store, download, right? All these free mobile apps that can help you with budgeting. I can recommend a few. Seedly, there's Pocket Guard, there's Wally. And the thing about the phone is everywhere we go, we will never forget our phone, right? So there's no excuse and say, I cannot use the phone to do my managing of my finances. Downloading a budgeting app, monitoring where my money goes to. Here you go. Use your phone. Use technology the right way, right? And secondly, all right, you can set reminders as well. Some of you are saying, I cannot remember. You can also remind the people around you, your body double, whoever, your spouse, your good friend, whoever, right? Hey, monitor or help me with this. If you think that you cannot resist the urge of spending, well, your credit card, go and hand it to someone else. All right, then you can focus on paying downs and you can set reminders as well, right? Even through the mobile budgeting apps or even through your mobile phones, your calendar, you can set reminders and of course use technology, automate, right? Either use gyro deduction to manage your credit card bill so that you will not pay late fees and whatnot. Continue to do so. Get yourself organized, see the benefit, but make sure that you cover all your basics. I remembered just now there was a question in the Q&A that I couldn't answer. How to resist the urge of impulsive buying? Well, to be honest, 2 weeks ago we had the 8/8 sale. In another 2 weeks' time, you're going to have the 9/9 sale. In 1 month's time, you're going to get the 10/10 sale. It's never ending. What you can do is to unsubscribe yourself from all online or mobile shopping lists. And one key takeaway that I can recommend all of you, and it works, is that don't save your credit card details in whatever phone apps like Lazada, Shopee, whatever, or any online shopping websites. This will definitely deter you like, I want to start paying for something. What was my credit card number? Never mind lah. Start to build those habits. And all this will actually come into play if you talk about investment, creating your wealth. You need to cover your basics. And this is something that everyone struggles with, whether or not you're from the ADHD community or not. Even in our help seekers, the line of work that we come in, everyone struggles with this. And I sincerely hope that you guys will also take note that help is also one step away. Always get back to us, go to our website, sign up for any of our free talks, and you will find out how you can actually attend one-to-one free counseling, credit counseling, to help you understand your situation better and to address your debt situation. Okay? I hope I'm not everybody's time. So sorry, Mian Lee and Gail.
Thank you, Firdaus. Really appreciate that. Again, practical stuff. You were saying that, don't have, all these reminders, right, to go and shop. But on the other hand, the other thing that helps on the positive side for reminders is actually notification about paying bills, right? And I think we need that sometimes. And we as ADHDers also need to understand that because of the hyper focus sometimes, whether it's hyper focusing on work or some other issue in our lives, sometimes the other things don't get tended to when they need to. And honestly, I've been guilty of that as well in the last couple of months. Forgetting to pay something on time, a stack of unopened mail. I always thought, how can people go through that? But then I realized I'm going through that myself, right? and is understanding that, that doesn't define me, but maybe it's just a phase of life, and then try and, just one thing at a time, right? Do something about it. We are getting close to the end of the evening already, and it's passing way too fast. Honestly, there's so many things to unpack here, but I was wondering, like, in the limited time that we have left, right? What are the one or two things that is, we've heard so many things tonight, different perspectives, right? What are the one or two things that each of you think that those who are listening in need to remember, that can change, what they are feeling or going through right now? Mian first.
I've been beating the same drum again and again, and I'm going to say the same thing again and again. It's not going to be a surprise. Give yourself credit. And I mean that in many ways, emotionally, but perhaps also. But jokes aside, sort of really give yourself credit for what you're doing. It's not easy. Our brains aren't wired to talk about difficult things. We just want to avoid it like the plague, even more so than the sort of neurotypical brain, right? And as it can be very difficult to know what to say and what to do to help sort of your loved ones with ADHD. And I would say focus on the strengths, focus on what they are doing, catch them doing good. These are sort of the few things that I would say. But again, above all, just give credit to yourself, because you guys are awesome. All right, that's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. So important. How about you, Gail?
We have two words that's the theme, which is not enough. Those of us who might not be normative, we carry that, right? And when it comes to money, everyone I meet and work with has some version of not enough. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough time. I don't know enough. And I don't trust myself enough. So I really wanted to remind everyone that wherever you are is the perfect place to start. And everyone has a journey to map and figure out. And it is possible.
Thank you for giving that hope. And I think we are coming up with this event here tonight. Maybe not what people expected when they see from the title, right? But I hope people also are coming to find their sense of self, from this event. Firdaus, how about yourself?
I guess
What two words?
Mian and Gail actually summarized it everything for me. Okay, but seriously, give yourself credit. That's one. That's really good, mainly. And I think from what Gail said, right? Knowing that we may not have enough, it's more important than ever to actually take charge of our finances, right? To be prepared for any financial setbacks. But lastly, I just like to share this, and I hope you guys attending this webinar find this beneficial, and that there is organization that helps individuals facing, for example, all these issues with debts. You can always approach CCS, find out our help process. We don't turn anyone away. We want anyone away. We welcome everyone, and really to address all this before it leads to more stress or more feelings of anxiety. There is an agency that can help you to manage your finances and, of course, to address the financial challenges that you may be facing. And thank you so much for attending tonight's webinar. I think that shows that you guys are willing to learn and you guys really want to make a difference and make a change, actually, right?
Thank you. Thank you. And I think, again, the whole purpose tonight was really to sensitize people to some of the issues that may be behind the repeated patterns of behavior, right? And not understanding what's the source of it. So understanding that, knowing where the help is, I think hopefully would give people a very practical way to move forward. Even as early as this evening or tomorrow. Really thank each of our panelists, Mian, Gail, Firdaus, for being here. For those of you who may not be formally diagnosed yet, but suspect that maybe some of these things have been tripping you up, may be related to ADHD, do consider scanning the QR code on the left. It's the self-assessment. This is not done by us. It's actually done by the World Health Organization, and we're just helping to distribute this. If you score high when you do this test, you can actually print it out and bring it when you see a mental health professional, whether it's a psychologist or psychiatrist, and this helps to structure your appointment. On the right, the QR code, you can download our Restart ADHD Starter Kit with all the local resources. It's really like a roadmap on what to do for help, and it's done by the Unlocking ADHD team and our volunteers, so it's free of charge. It's actually being used by many of the clinics to as a resource for their patients. Next thing as well that's important is, again, as a young charity, we're really much dependent on the support of you in our community and others to help us continue to do the important work that needs to be done. Again, we know the prevalence rate is so high. What are the resources available? So please do support us. The good news is that we're tote board matched. So every dollar, it actually has 2 times the impact. So really grateful for your support, and also thank you for helping us to pay for this webinar by being here tonight. Really appreciate that. And this last QR code is if you want to connect with Unlocking ADHD, be on our mailing list for future events, join the support groups that we have, come for our next events. These are all the key links that you need. So please do scan it.